This is JX Drive. I'm Isabella, and today we have a guest with us.
Hi, my name is Ranco, and I'm calling in from Bogotá, Colombia.
Okay.
Welcome, Ranco. And my name is Dan. So I'm the CEO of JX Design, and we are from LA, California, USA.
Okay, so do you both want to go a little bit into like what you do and how you met?
Ranco, you go first.
Okay, I'm an executive agile coach who is on a mission to spark 1 million people with the agile spark of entrepreneurship, fixing stuff, self-organization, setting the right priorities, and having a balanced workplace where we focus on outcomes. So that's really what I'm about and what I train and teach executive leaders and teams to change the way they work, to boost innovation and create better places to work.
Thank you, Ranco. I think I've given my introductions
Well,
fairly few
yeah.
times. So, okay. So, I'm the best way to put it, like product design and development delivery evangelist across the globe. So um, I I I worked in Australia, I worked in Middle East and Asia. Now we're in USA, and I'm the CEO of JX Design and Lunam.
And a really good question, Isabel, how we met, because it's quite during COVID, I guess. Then it was
Yes,
during
we
COVID,
did
right?
during COVID, Ranko.
Yeah. So it was a Wednesday web jam organized by a group of designers across the world, but I think majority was from the Netherlands in the organization team, and we were in a breakout room, and there was the connection, and we picked it up from there.
Yes, we did.
And my kids are still amazed that I can meet someone that I never met in person, Isabella. That's really crazy, right?
Yeah, that's still like I had no idea that you guys have never met in person.
We never. We will be really surprised if we meet.
Yes, yes, we did. It is amazing that we met actually. During COVID, I was trying to connect with people as much as possible online because I was in Melbourne during that time, and I think out of the entire world, Melbourne was the most locked down city, and we have very tough restrictions. So the best way to connect with people professionally or even in personally is basically via online. And when I was looking for events to join, and I saw the event that Wednesday Web Jam. It's focused on service design and human-centered design practices, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning in my time, and it's amazing that amount of people that joined that session. I think there were people across the world joined that session, and it was quite collaborative, like-minded people, and yeah, we hit it off very well, and we then take it like after we met. We shared our details and we started connecting, outside that event.
Yeah, and what I really liked was the premises on failing forward. So they did a lot of experiments with different formats that you can use working online remotely and engage groups or people or one-on-one conversations. So that was really something that I liked about the Wednesday Web Jam. And it was, I think, for me, 10 in the evening in Jakarta time. So I think it was 5 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Europe. So across the world, it was quite challenging to make it happen. But we were there and we met. And I think one thing that Dan and I had in common that so I was living in Asia, and of course he got a lot of experience in Asia. So that, and culturally we had a lot of commonalities. So that's where we connected.
Yeah, okay. So since we're going a little bit about like the different countries that you guys have both experienced, you want to go over and list a few or like the main like past ones that you have been in and worked in?
Sure. So I'm born in Colombia. I'm adopted, grew up in the Netherlands, lived for the last 10 years in Indonesia. And we just recently moved to Colombia, Bogotá. where we hopefully learn a little bit more about the culture of my roots.
Mhm.
And Ranco, so what are your experiences in your career that across those countries?
Okay, so I worked in the Netherlands for about 10 years in retail and logistics in multinational companies. So we dealt with people in Europe or across the globe. Um, and in the last 4 or 5 years, I was executive agile coach and COO of a small consultancy firm that did agile coaching and training. And on the side, I was giving lectures in an international program of the university, mainly in entrepreneurship, cross-cultural understanding, leadership, etc. So that's basically what I've done around the world, and there are big difference, but I think we will get there later on.
Yeah.
So for me, of course, I was born in Sri Lanka, then I moved to Australia. And then of course I have worked across Australian organizations or different industries, um, energy sector to fintech, government, social justice, as well as retail, and also worked within the Asia Pacific companies while I was in Melbourne and Sydney. I've also worked for larger corporations via a service design agency in Dubai. So I was there delivering some projects, and also now in USA working across digital platforms. And that was actually my journey. And yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So with each different place that you have been, can you go over and highlight the importance of like cultural context and the influences that were in each area?
Yeah, so for me, it's quite important to understand cultural differences, whether you work nationally or internationally. I think every company or organization have their own culture of doing things and how they communicate, how they act. And so culture differences is for me really um, a game changer. If you understand the culture, it's easy to persuade people to get things done, to connect with people. And I think it's really essential across the world or even locally or in your family to understand what is the culture, how do we do things here.
I totally agree with you, Ranko. I mean, it's very interesting. Again, like the cultural differences really set the tone of voice of how you communicate physically and digitally as well. I've come across um, digital representation or digital transformation projects that how we write the content, for example, for a user to read. That's number one. From delivery perspective, and even in Middle East, how you write certain content to their culture. US is another different culture, and the lingo, how you write certain things, and then you really think about how you communicate towards the people, like physically, verbally, that how you communicate. This week is the tech week in LA, and I've been attending a lot of events. I'm learning a lot about the way they understand what I'm saying, and I'm being adjusting towards the culture of, I mean, I would say LA, not just USA, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very different culture. We were in San Francisco a couple of months ago, and even though it's the same state, the way they speak about certain things and what the lingo they use, it's very different. And when you take it to Australia, it's total different. And even Asia and Middle East is the same. I think it's a key that you learn the culture and adapting to culture and communicate towards them the way they do communicate day to day. That helps them to feel more comfortable from a, I think, emotional and psychological. I think that they feel more comfortable. They feel more like home, for example, when you talk to, I mean, then they listen to you and you talk to them as well. Yeah, that's key. Absolutely.
Yeah, and even simple things of learning to say hi in a different language really open doors and set the stage states of a connection, because sometimes it's more like the fear that they have in their head that they cannot communicate properly in English, or they don't understand your way of doing things. Just opening and be creative in connecting with people is really helpful. Just to and I think another thing is also critical is to listen and observe and sense what's going on here, because I think most of the time we like to respond on based on our own experience, but forget about what is the context. How do people operate in this culture? How do they interact with each other? What is leadership? How do they make decisions, etc.
Yeah, absolutely, I
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, and then going more niche, since you are an agile coach, Ranco, do you want to explore how agile practices are adopted and adapted in each country that you've been on?
Yeah, so I think if I look at Europe, they are quite advanced and quite far ahead of many other countries in terms of practices and how they try to integrate agile practices in IT or in other areas of business. Um, but what I see, for example, in Indonesia, and again also a little bit in Colombia, is that the there's still a lot of space to learn. And I think maybe language is one part of it. The other thing is also a strong culture of hierarchy. So what we learned in Indonesia in the hard way is that we thought, oh, the owner and I are Dutch, so we thought, okay, bottom up transformation can work. Why not? And but that didn't fly. So if we didn't have the buy-in from the senior leader, or at least one or two senior leaders sitting in the transformation office, it will not go anywhere. And that is something that is really cultural, because if people just wait until the leadership is saying left or right, then that's just the way it is. So we learned the hard way that bottom-up transformation in Indonesian don't work. If I listen to the stories here in Colombia, it's almost similar. It's quite risk averse, but also quite top-down led, most of the organizations. So you need to convince or to connect with the senior leadership to get anything done if you want to change the way they work, and show them, okay, this is what it can bring you. Otherwise, it will not go anywhere. So that's what I learned so far. But I think it's also maybe a stage of maturity. Um, I think more and more information from agile practices are translated in the different languages, so people are getting more and more knowledge and access to knowledge. Nowadays with Google Translate, we can easily read a lot of stuff that is coming from the West, from the US or from Europe. I think a second challenge is really to make it contextual. Like I said, there is in Colombia as well as in Asia and Indonesia a really strong hierarchy. So top down is really the way they organize themselves, and that's not easy to change. So a lot of examples are from Europe, where it's maybe more flat organizations or more liberal. They give people more freedom to make decisions and take more responsibilities. So we need to take that in account as well, that a lot of examples that we have are from the West, and we need to translate them into the context that we are working with. And that is really a challenge, because a lot of clients that I've met in Indonesia, for example, in Jakarta, they ask, oh, do you have any example? And there are not many examples of agile practices at this point of time. So it's always a challenge to make it more contextual with what we have.
Yeah, that's very interesting that it was two very like different places, but you notice a similarity between the two and how implementation happened and like how you had to go forward with communication.
Right. How about you, Dan?
Yeah.
Agile. I mean, I'm gonna start with a joke actually for this. So when I was in Melbourne, working for two big banks, and at the same time I was working for an energy company. And it's funny that all three organizations, product owners or even Scrum Masters, but then again, you're talking about chapter leads and you know how the scale model works, Ranko. They were talking about it's not agile, it's fragile because it's not working. It's actually it's not working, and it's not the best methodology for certain cultures, maybe. Honestly speaking, again going back to a bit of I'll go back to a little bit about culture again. I mean, it's really an impact from culture to standardized methodology across the globe. Now, regardless whether whether the methodology is proven in one country or they believe that this is human interaction, but the culture plays a huge role. I'll give you an example. So Australia is a very laid back country, and I'm not saying it's slow. I'm saying they take their time and they do things differently. You take USA, for example, they're completely opposite. I was at a American Australian Association event last night, and the one of the panelists are talking about uh, don't be like typical Aussies in Australia when you're trying to communicate. I mean, the follow up, you need to follow up either same day or next day. Where in Australia, you follow up like few days after, maybe next week, and it's how it is. The reason I actually took that example now, for agile to work, you really need to follow a structural pattern of ceremonies. And waterfall is something that we knew worked before a long time ago. And now people are confused between whether this is waterfall or agile or lean. So I think there is this cultural impact towards waterfall, because it worked for them because of the way they are. And now agile is disrupting that culture. And you can't, it's very difficult to disrupt society, I think, society culture. You can disrupt organizational culture. I think you probably agree on that, Ranko, right? It's different. So I think that is the impact that I saw. That's the difference that I see. Now, when I moved to US, I mean, I have a good friend of mine who works at Atlassian, and he's a senior solution architect. And he talks about Agile because they have Jira and Confluence running across Agile. But when you talk to other people, they are trying to adopt Agile, but they're still on either lean or waterfall because of the culture, because the senior stakeholders said, I don't care, get it done now, get it done tomorrow, get it done. So how can you disrupt that to work for your organization? Because the individual works in an organization, he's still human who live within the culture of a country or a society. So I think I see there's a bit of a pattern. That's my personal experience. I mean, in Middle East, they're very structured. So if they say you have to follow Agile, you do, and there is no questions asked because it's a bit different. I think I worked with companies in India as well. They run Agile pretty seriously. It works for them, and I think that they adapt very quickly for things like this. So you can see how cultural, like society and the country's culture, how it affects in organizational culture as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also due if we go back to our personal development from childhood education to the workplace. If we look at Asia, there's always someone that tells you what to do. If it's not your parent that runs behind you as a little kid and feed you with a spoon, then there's a teacher at school that tells you when and how to make homework and do things. And then you go to the university, there's a professor telling you what to do. So the question, especially in countries like Indonesia, the question is, okay, how do we develop problem solving skills, analytical critical thinking skills, because there's not that much space to work on that development. And then you go to the workplace and then you look at your boss to tell you what to do. So if we go into agile, and we had t-shirts in Indonesia printed, don't tell me what to do, and that's really anti-culture, because the whole upbringing from childhood to the workplace is that people tell them what to do. Even for example, I had students in my class that ask, well, what are you doing here? Yeah, my parents sent me, and my grandfather is paying, so he decided that I need to do management. So there's hardly any space for development on that side. And then you go into the workplace, and most, like I said, it's hierarchy, it's quite structured, it's quite clear how your path will go. If you're successful, you go up in the ladder of the pyramid. And agile is more like, okay, we need to make it flat. We make people more responsible, give them the authority to take decisions on budget, hiring, whatever is needed to move faster. And that is, in a lot of cultures, it's really hard to embed that. Even if we tell them, or even if we try with a whole set of new people, whether they're young or old, and we start a whole new company, it's still part of our DNA, how we do things in our culture. And that's not easy to get out of our way of working.
Oh, absolutely. I think Isabella, you can contribute to that as well. I mean, because she was born and raised in LA in here, and the difference of cultures, like it's different. I mean,
Yeah, it is very different. Just like the communication as a baseline is definitely different. And then it goes into those hierarchies where it's like listening to your story saying about how those in Indonesia people grow up being told what to do. I was just thinking like, wow, like I always had that choice myself and what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, especially education and professional wise. That's always been like strictly my choice. So that's very interesting to hear.
Yeah, but I think then you have the same experience in your home country, right?
yes.
That
So
people expect you become a banker or a lawyer or a doctor, because that's really prestigious, right? That's where the family can go to birthday parties, wedding, and say, "Hey, Dan, he became a lawyer, so we are good to go."
I agree. I think the Asian culture is very determined towards certain ways of representing them as a family or a hierarchy, class, caste, to everything. My personal experience was very different. My parents were pretty open, and my father had few visions towards, of course, me and my brother and sister, but it was never forced upon, and that was a bit, yeah, that was easier. And I know, but this majority, the cultural, the mass, and they are like that. And I have friends who had quite a tough time and doing what they love to do, or whether to do what their parents want them to do as well. So yeah, it carries through to the organization. It carries through to the culture of an organization as well. And I guess I agree. Hierarchy plays a huge role in certain uh, countries because of the cultural upbringing, and that's how it's actually drives down towards the organizational operations, and then the cross-functional cultures as well.
But I think that's one part of the puzzle. The other part is that if we have leaders in a hierarchy structure in big corporates, or whether it's a middle-sized company, do you think they would like to let go parts of their power and control? No. They worked hard to get where they are today. So they do everything in their power to protect their kingdom. And there's a logic, of course, because if you are in a position that maybe 100, 200 people are listening to you and looking at you for decision making, that is like a rock star status, right? So it's addictive. It's part of how we do things in many countries, especially in the corporate landscape. No matter if you are in Australia, in US, or in Indonesia, or in Colombia, or in the Netherlands, it's everywhere. The power is addictive. So if you go agile, or you want to change the way we work, then you need to come from good houses to convince them and say, hey, you need to become a coach, you need to facilitate, you need to mentor. You don't tell them what to do, because you hire smart people. That is really globally still far from what I like to see, more human-centered organization.
No, I agree. I totally agree with you, Rank, on that. Yes.
Yeah. So navigating these different cultures, do you have any memorable success stories where you had to take a unique approach for implementation?
Yeah, I had the honor, and I was thinking this morning because I'm starting joining the Management 3.0, and they have a website that match people. So I was talking to a guy from Mexico, and he spoke Spanish, and my Spanish is really limited, but it was apparently good enough to follow the conversation. Maybe because we talked about something that we both love. Um, I had a similar situation in Indonesia where I helped an IT company, their board of directors, to to go agile, to change the way they work. And the first thing they asked, Ranco, can we speak Indonesian, Bahasa Indonesia? And you can speak in English, and that's fine. So we did it bilingual. All the sessions that we did was bilingual, but that was really powerful because they could express themselves in their own language. And I was long enough in the country to understand what they meant. And if not, then I could ask some of the guys and say, I don't understand this word or what you meant. But it was really close to their heart because they felt like, okay, if I do it in English, it will take away part of my emotions, part of my thinking, and this opened the doors for them to really express themselves. And we were able, because they were really eager to learn how to change the way they work. They were really aware that if they go left as a leader, as senior leaders, that the whole organization, they had 500 people developing IT products, looking at them. And they always ask me, hey, Ranco, how can we, for example, help them to talk more? How can we create a safe space for them to express what they really need or what they're passionate about or what they see as a next step? And through all the sessions in bilingual, we were able to set them up for a successful start of agile practices. And the change, and I always challenge them. I said, the change is with you. If you let it go, then everybody will look at you and say, okay, you just did it for a month, 2 months with an external executive coach, but then you lose focus. And I think they were quite serious on how to implement and how to change from their leadership perspective as well. So that was really a fun journey to walk alongside with them.
Yeah, I think that resonates with me. The session that we did, so with Ranco and one of actually his team of agile practitioners, Ranco requested me to run a visual thinking and visual doing session, and and we ran it bilingual. So when I was trying to explain how when we were running the session, like how we think it visually, and also how you do things visually, and we had one of the practitioners who is kind of translating into Indonesian on some of the things, because some participants were not really good at English, understanding English, and also conversing in English. Some of them did understand, but they couldn't converse, they couldn't talk, like they couldn't speak English, but they did understand. So there was very interesting session we ran. I mean, we did it remotely, and
Right.
that
And
was
you know, then that Nessie, that I think before I left to Colombia, she still remembered and came up. Do you still remember the time that we did this session with Dan? And it was really inspiring, giving me a different point of view. It was really fun. This was a really memorable
Thank
session.
you. I mean, I really enjoyed it in a time that how we connect and visually. So that's a good session. And to continue with the conversation towards like memorable success stories and unique approaches on what I did across is especially adapting to two different ways. So one is adapting to culture of Australia, but I can't see Ranco's story. Like I moved to Australia in my late teens. So for example, so I kind of grew up there, and it's about adjusting to the culture first, and then I went to university there, and my life, I mean, my career started from there. But when I was in Dubai, it was a challenge in adapting to their culture first, and the stakeholders are very diverse. You have people in Dubai they come from all over the place. I think there's about close to 200 countries. I mean, the citizens who lives in as expats in Dubai. So you can imagine the diversity. So it's quite intriguing, exciting, and challenging. The success story is that I had to be me. If I have tried to fit into certain culture, it wouldn't have worked for me. So first thing I thought to myself, I first has to be me to be good at what I do. So I started there. And then I started running design thinking sessions and the journeys that we created for the most around human-centered design pieces that we did. The success story is that they started collaborating more on their own way, and I actually let it flow as a multicultural session. And you be you, right? Don't try to fit in for a culture right now, because if we do, then we are not getting that unique contributions. So I've always pushed the envelope around when we run sessions. You have to contribute. Whether, don't ever think that it's a bad idea or a stupid idea or a stupid question. All these stupid questions and bad ideas that people think they are the one of the best ones most of the time. So you contribute from your own way, that where your culture and how you brought yourself up to become who you are really gives the different perspective of the solution. And knowing that in the tech industry, the globalization or global market is become so the norm now. Like you can design and create, and you can build a platform or a software in any country. It doesn't matter where you build up, because now it's access to anyone or everyone in the world. So I think the crossed or the dynamic of cultures really works well at that time. And it's a bit of a, yeah, I think that's my success story of that particular incident. I mean, it's very difficult for me to bring a success story within an Australian my career in Australia, or my time in Australia, because I grew up into that culture, so I'm part of culture. However, from an organizational perspective, every time you go to a different organization, they have a very different culture. It's because of the organizational structure. Some companies, one of the banks that I worked in, we did contracts with, work with one of the banks we work with in Australia. The entire digital department, which is tech, runs by marketing. And it was very different. Like, even though they want to do agile, it is very, very tough for the tech department, because marketing makes those decisions. So there was a bit of a friction there, and there's a lot of challenges. Another company that I work is an energy company. It was all, the entire business was structured towards digital transformation. So the business and marketing and sales departments having a challenge there as well. So it's very different, and you adapt to it, and you try to understand their lingo. So when I talk to a developer, or when I talk to a sales and marketing person, or it could be any kind of expertise that they bring, as long as you start to talk about their language, the words that they use to talk about their work, I think that's a success for the collaborative success that I had is talking their language. I think it goes back to what you mentioned, Ranco, like saying hello in a different language. They feel like, okay, at least he's trying. She's trying, right? So they're trying. So that gives a bit of a acknowledgement to help. So psychologically, I think that the human interactions start like, oh, struggling, so I should help them. I think the nature of us is always about helping people. I think that's not going to go in the human mind or on the mindfulness. So I think that really triggers that collaborative environments as well. I mean, those are the stories I can share.
So what I liked about your story then is that you said bring yourself, and of course we need to be sensitive about what is okay and what is not okay in a certain culture. But the other thing is also that failing forward, like they did in the Wednesday Web Jam, together in a multicultural setting, that we learn to make mistakes and be vulnerable and acknowledge that we don't know everything, because every human individual is different, every organization is different, every group of people is different. So to embrace that kind of things in your day-to-day work instead of coming in and say, "Oh, I have all the answers." I think that's a great way.
Yeah, thank you, Rank, for validation of that. I think it was a fantastic experience that I had while I was there.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Okay, so do you want to like explore how different communication style, teamwork dynamics, and decision-making processes differ across the different cultures you've experienced working in?
Yeah, so for me, it's really coming down to feedback. I think feedback is one of the few things that we can use to improve our performances. And for example, in the Netherlands, it's quite on the spot if people like it or not. They tell it in your face. Even during a meeting, they will tell you, no, Ranco, that's wrong, or I disagree. Um, so that is something that you need to be aware of. Instead, compare with Indonesians. They will never tell you in public what they really think. So that's a challenge, right? In terms of feedback, if you talk about a group dynamic, but even individual, if you have different levels, it's harder to get some good insights on what people really think about the way you do things or how you perform. And the other side is true. As a Dutch, if I give feedback, sometimes people felt like, oh, I'm really challenged by the way you provide feedback. So over time, I learn to become more sensitive about how different cultures give feedback. So like I said, Dutch are really straightforward. Indonesians are really high contextual. You need to understand what they said between the lines or maybe sense what they do. And then Colombians are a little bit in between, as far as I can say now, after 6 weeks being here, talking to different people. They are more confident than Indonesians, as far as I can see, but they are also a little bit more clear on giving feedback. And I think I try to find out how that really works, but to me that those are three different things that I can pick up from working in different countries with different people. If we talk about feedback and culture and decision making, how about you then?
I totally agree. I think even in Australia right now, I mean, before I left a while ago, Australia is a multicultural country, and they are the last 20 to 25 years, maybe even 30 years, they've grown into a multicultural nation, and a lot of immigrants are coming in. And in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, a lot of tech immigrants were coming into the country to growing markets. So it is very multicultural, and you can see within an organization, even within the same country, because they've grew up in a different country. So when they were adult, they moved to Australia. So you still have that huge residual cultural, personas within them, and it portrays when you work across other people in an organization. So for example, I think Australians are like you said. So I think it's that Asian and Australasia culture, that bit contextual. Like you need to read between the lines, and they're polite, and there's part to it. Where in Middle East, it's very direct, and you will say it how it is, and you need to get a job done. I think USA, I would say, is pretty similar from my recent experiences. That of course I'm not saying they're not polite. It's just that they say the things that they want to say in a polite way, but they're very direct to the point. In I would say in subcontinent, also in Asia Pacific, there is this cultural thing. Again, it comes to culture, right, Ranko? So it comes to culture because you've been taught to be polite, too nice, and and you don't offend other people, be kind. And I'm not saying the other cultures don't teach that. I think they do it in a different way, that you stick to. I mean, how can you get to say something quickly to the point? How succinctly you express yourself, where certain cultures don't. I think communication styles really plays a huge part on um, uh, on how how you interact or how you collaborate with other people. I think there was a quote, I think rather a quote, I've heard something on social media, but I mean, you can build yourself up to become whoever you want, but as soon as you open your mouth, they know who you are. So it's about how you communicate and the style of communication and managing yourself across the collaborative environment. I think teamwork really plays a huge role with that, with the style of communication, and you'll always find someone in the team that have struggles, or in the team that is the odd one, that or disrupt, right? The cultural disrupt, I would say. And you have these moments, and how you manage that at that situation, not rather managing the person, manage yourself with the situation to communicate that with that person. And decision making process, it really goes within that process. Who am I communicating with? What cultural or what environment or dynamics you're in a team, to a cross-functional team, to an organization, and also what is the culture of your society, like environment of the country. And sometimes I think, Isabella, you probably can explain to this. I think the different states of USA have very different way of speaking as well, and the cultural differences really, I guess, is there a differences in cultures that plays a part when
It's one of my favorite things is New York Times has a dialect quiz where it could place you exactly where in the United States you're from just by little phrases and words that you say. And I like taking that from time to time. And it always gets me in Southern California. And the questions are simple, like, what do you call like the piece of grass in the middle of the road? What do you call like the they have to phrase the questions in a certain way where they don't say the actual word, but basically one of the questions, like, do you call like this stuff on the cake frosting or icing? So it's very simple questions, but just by answering those, it could place you directly where in the US. So it's just little things like that where it's just totally different. Like someone from the East and West Coast, completely different experiences, different way of talking. So just little things like that is just very different. But overall, I think culturally, we're very similar. It's just those little things that pop up that are different.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that is something that I also found start of this year. I've traveled to Orlando, Florida, and met few people, and you can see the differences there as well. And of course, it was in Nevada as well, and there are differences. You can see and feel the differences of communication. And from the start, I mean, with this session, I think one of the things that we've talked about is communication styles within different countries. And it is a key, again, like, reiterating that how important it is on that. And one of the experiences I had, but 10 years ago, I was visiting Sri Lanka. I was visiting my parents, and I was I was I was driving. My father was sitting next to me. I was driving, and I was changing lanes, and I put the indicator and I changed. And he actually asked me, "What are you doing?" So, because in Sri Lanka, people don't follow rules as much. I think this, so they drive. I mean, if you go and check it on online, like, I mean, there's a lot of vehicles, a lot of cars, and on the road, and not as big, not as many lanes as you'll find it in US or Australia or even Europe, or for this, but even Middle East. And it's congestion, and you don't do that. You actually, and what are you doing? Why did you have to do that? And see, it's just the adaptation of where you live and how you commit. And I'm like, this is the right thing, because this is after living in Australia for such a long time. And that's how you do. And that repetitiveness of your being, of doing certain things in certain countries, really builds the way you communicate, the way you do things. And it is funny that we don't think about those things a lot, but I think we I think that's what we call soft skill when you walk into an organization. How you manage yourself to be a person across organization, across a team, that people will come to talk to you and it's easy to talk to you. You listen to them and then you comply with the request or comply with the other way around, vice versa. And this whole thing works around that, and how we carry ourselves across uh, in a team, multiple or cross-functional teams, an organization, a town to city to a country, and how you do that. So I think it's just that understanding of the exploring the culture and the communication style really plays a part of when you're in a team, when you're in an organization, how you basically communicate towards everyone else. And when people understands you, it becomes so much easier to work with them as well, I think. So I think that's my insight towards it.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, it's really about what is accepted and familiar for yourself, and what is accepted and familiar for the environment that you work in, and bring those two together. That is really helping you to navigate in different countries, in different organizations, and help you to get things done, help them in the transformation or whatever your aim is there.
Yeah.
Okay, that was all the questions I had. So if you want to add anything else, let me know.
I think
No, I think it was a great.
let's do a final thought, Ranco, each of us, and we'll of course with
Yeah.
Isabella as well.
Okay.
You can start, so I have time to think.
I think the entire session of today's our podcast, our talk is like how cultural differences or the cultural dynamics in across countries, across continents, and we've traveled and seen people and places and how they communicate. So we are still humans, and environments, when you put a human or when you put someone into an environment, they adapt towards that. And since I'm not going to talk on behalf of you, Ranko, for me personally, because I have been in places, multiple places, I had been living there to work. That has given me I had to adapt, and adaptation was the key. And understanding the cultural communication style, lingo, helped to work closely and that expectation of why you were there, what to do, was that. I think that's the lesson, that is the key, that has taken me or brought me to where I am. I think that's my recap of my experiences, or even including the conversation today.
Yeah, great summary, and I think like I said earlier, I think what is accepted and familiar for yourself. So I think it's, if I teach cross-cultural understanding, I always said, okay, it starts with you, nobody else. So if you know what is accepted and familiar for you, then you can easily navigate in other environments. And the second one that I really want to give you here is that we need to learn the language of love. For example, in Indonesia, it's bring food to your team meetings, because that really helps them to relax and to have a conversation with you. Whether maybe in other countries there is something else that you need to understand what is really important in the culture that really make them relax or open up for you. So we need to figure out and be curious, willing to fail, and keep learning.
Thank you, Ranko. Great summary as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Isabella, what's your take out of the conversation?
I guess since I've always been very localized, born and raised in Southern California, and like I didn't realize how, of course, there's cultural differences, but when it comes to something as niche as like, let's say like design and agile, like I would think that that's like universal, like it all follows the same thing, but it really goes down into these like micro channels where there's little things that come up and really affect it as a whole. And you have to take in consideration the culture you're in, and like what you just mentioned about how like you can really get to a person in Indonesia with food. Like it's little things like that that you just have to take into consideration before seeing the bigger picture.
That's
Great
it.
summary.
Yes. Okay
Okay.
then.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today. I think
You're
it was a
welcome.
really good session.
Yes, and Ranco, thank you so much for joining us from Bogotá, Colombia. And we really appreciate your time. I know you have responsibility, you have a family, and you're growing your network out there. So giving us an hour of your time of this day, we really appreciate that. And we're looking forward to do many sessions like this as we used to do LinkedIn live sessions while I was in Melbourne and you were in Indonesia. We should start continuing to do that with multiple uh, disciplines and multiple practices as well.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. It was as always a really nice conversation, and I think then the culture is really one thing that really sparked our initial friendship. So good to pick it up where we left it.
Thank you so much. You have a great day ahead and have a
You
good
too.
weekend.
Okay. Ciao.